Have you ever wondered why Michigan was one of the last states in the old Northwest Territory to join the Union? While Ohio became a state back in 1803 and Indiana in 1816, Michigan did not join the Union until 1837, basically a full generation or two later. Today, we're diving into the surprising reasons why settlers initially bypassed it, and how a bitter border war with Ohio actually gave Michigan its greatest treasure. Let's set the scene in the early 1800s. When American settlers pushed west, they were looking for fertile, easy to farm land. What they found in much of the Michigan territory was discouraging. Dense forests covered large areas, and vast swamps and wetlands dominated parts of the landscape, especially in southeast Michigan and along the border regions. Much of that area was essentially a watery wilderness of chains of lakes, slow creeks, and heavy clay soils that turned into deep mud when it rained. Even today, you can still see remnants of that wet geography in places, though modern drainage systems and civil engineering have turned a lot of it into productive farmland. Early reports described large parts of Michigan as a mosquito-ridden swamp. Not exactly prime real estate compared to the open prairies of Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. As a result, many settlers streamed around it, heading for better farmland further west or south. But Michigan wasn't completely isolated. The French had trading posts there since the 1600s, and Detroit was a key frontier town. Still, overland travel was rough. That all changed dramatically in 1825 with the opening of the Erie Canal. This 363-mile waterway connected the Hudson River in New York all the way to Lake Erie at Buffalo, New York. From there, people and goods could travel by steamboat, sailing vessels across Lake Erie and up the Detroit River, and directly into the Michigan Territory. Suddenly, the Great Lakes became a practical highway from the East Coast. Public land sales in Detroit spiked right after the canal opened, and settlement accelerated. Population numbers tell the story clearly. In 1820, Michigan Territory only had about 9,000 people. By 1830, just 5 years after the Erie Canal opened, that number had jumped to around 32,000. By the mid-1830s, a territorial census showed roughly 85 to 87,000 residents in the lower peninsula alone, well above the 60,000 threshold needed for statehood under the Northwest Ordinance. By the early 1830s, Michigan's population was growing fast enough that leaders began pushing hard for statehood. In 1835, they drafted a state constitution and elected their first governor. The fiery young boy governor, Stevens T. Mason. Born in 1811, Mason was only 19 when he became secretary of the territory, and just 23 when he stepped in as acting governor after the previous governor died. By the time he was elected governor in 1835, he was only 23 to 24 years old, the youngest state governor in U.S. history. Mason's youth and energy made him a symbol for Michigan's bold push for statehood. But there was one huge problem: the border with Ohio. Both Michigan Territory and Ohio claimed a narrow strip of valuable land along their border, called the Toledo Strip, which included the growing port town of Toledo at the mouth of the Maumee River. This strip was strategically important for shipping and future canals. Neither side would back down. Tensions exploded in 1835 into the Toledo War. Ohio's governor called out the militia. Michigan's boy governor did the same. There were standoffs, a few shots fired, and even the capture of an Ohio sheriff by Michigan forces. It was mostly bloodless, sometimes jokingly called the War of the Toothpicks, but serious enough that Congress refused to admit Michigan as a state until the dispute was settled. President Andrew Jackson and Congress eventually offered a compromise. Michigan would give up its claim to the Toledo Strip, which went to Ohio, and in exchange, Michigan would receive the western 3/4 of the Upper Peninsula. At the same time, most Michiganders were furious. The UP was seen as a frozen, worthless wilderness. Michiganders initially rejected the deal. Pressure mounted. Michigan desperately wanted statehood and the benefits that came with it. In December 1836, delegates met in Ann Arbor, Michigan, during bitterly cold weather for what became known as the Frostbitten Convention. There, the delegates finally voted to accept the compromise. On January 26, 1837, Michigan officially became the 26th state, nearly a generation after its neighbors. Here's the incredible twist. That worthless Upper Peninsula turned out to be one of the richest mineral regions in the world. Massive copper and iron deposits helped fuel America's Industrial Revolution. In hindsight, Michigan got the far better end of the deal. So, why was Michigan delayed? A combination of harsh, swampy geography that scared off early settlers, slow initial population growth until the Erie Canal opened water routes via the Great Lakes, and a stubborn border dispute that required compromise. In the end, that delay helped shape the distinctive shape and economic backbone of the state that we know today as Michigan. Thanks for watching.